Good afternoon. I'm Olivia Quay, live in the Straits Times newsroom. Malaysia's new Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob has unveiled his cabinet that has the immediate task of dealing with the country's raging COVID-19 crisis. Mr. Ismail, though, has left the deputy premiership empty. Well, let's take a look at who will be helming the key portfolios. Former Science, Technology and Innovation Minister Khairi Jamaluddin will be helming the Ministry of Health. He was also the coordinating minister of the National COVID-19 Immunisation Programme under the previous Perikatan Nasional administration. Now, it faced criticism due to its mismanagement of the second and third COVID-19 wave, which saw rocketing new cases and deaths. Zafrul Aziz has been retained as Finance Minister. Same goes with several senior ministers from the previous administration, like Defence Minister Hishamuddin Hussein, Home Affairs Minister Hamza Zainuddin, and Education Minister Radzi Jidin. Well, with more is the Straits Times' Malaysia correspondent Ram Anand, who's joining in from Kuala Lumpur. Welcome to the show, Ram. So, any surprising appointments for you, or is it pretty much status quo?
It is pretty much status quo. If you see the appointments of 4 senior ministers and the lack of a deputy prime minister, it is identical to exactly the cabinet that Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, the previous prime minister, announced in March 2020. So you can say that Mr. Ismail Sabri just took a leaf out of his predecessor's books in that sense, yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, Mr. Ismail's own party, UMNO, dominating the lineup as we saw there. But what does the cabinet makeup signal for all the parties that are in the administration?
I think the cabinet signals that Mr. Ismail has tried to keep all the parties happy, because as we know, the government comprises of 2 grand coalitions, Perikatan Nasional and also Mr. Ismail's own Barisan Nasional, which is led by UMNO. We have 10 ministers from UMNO. That's about 1/3 of the total ministers that have been appointed today. So I would say that the makeup is pretty much similar. Last time, Mr. Muhyiddin had 9 ministers from UMNO. This time, since the Prime Minister himself is from UMNO, we have more representation from UMNO in the current cabinet. But I think in terms of the makeup of the cabinet, all the parties that made up the previous cabinet, they have been represented well enough in that sense.
Well, I guess speaking of representation, Mr. Muhyiddin's government had 32 ministers. This one has the same number, if I'm not mistaken, but some have said the previous cabinet was too bloated and that this one would be leaner. Your thoughts on that, Ram?
Yes, definitely. There was a lot of talk about having a more lean cabinet because Mr. Muhyiddin formed his cabinet. The COVID-19 lockdown was not in effect yet. He formed it about 2 weeks before Malaysia entered the first lockdown. So there was a perception that Mr. Ismail Sabri, because he could form a cabinet when COVID is raging as it is right now, he would have the opportunity to go for a leaner cabinet, to go for what they call a war cabinet, to specifically tackle the COVID-19 problems that we have in the country. But clearly that has not been the case. I think that is partially because of the political makeup and how little majority he has. He has largely retained the composition of the cabinet. It has exactly 31 ministers and 38 deputy ministers, excluding the prime minister.
Right. Well, on that note, Ram, one last question before I let you go. You talked about, I guess, what is signals for Mr. Ismail's direction. So what do these cabinet appointments show about the new PM's priorities then?
I think what it shows is it's sort of a double-edged sword. I think there will definitely be criticism about the size of the cabinet, but I think it also shows, again, the fragility of leading this government with such a small majority. It's an attempt, I think, in the first week of his premiership, we have seen his attempt to keep sort of everyone happy. He's come out with the right messaging. He's met the opposition leaders. He has I think he's come to some sort of agreement with them, which is something Mr. Muhyiddin did not do, or did not manage to achieve at least. But it also shows that he wants to keep the people in his coalition happy at the same time. So I think it's a difficult task for him to keep everyone happy, And I think that sort of shows in the cabinet appointment today that he is trying to keep all the parties that are both supporting him and also in the opposition aisle happy at the same time.
Right. Well, Ram, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing more on these developments. I've been speaking with Ram Anand, Malaysia correspondent for The Straits Times. The new cabinet will be sworn in on Monday, August 30th, and our Malaysia bureau will have more updates on today's announcements over at straitstimes.com. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on The Big Story later today at 5:30 p.m.